Asian. The national anthem. Guide our leaders right, lofty heights attain to Excellency Kashim Shettima, Chairman, Interministerial Committee on Nigeria's members of the Federal Executive Level Special Advisors to Mr. President, and I do see the Chief of Staff, Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. Permanent secretaries here present, our distinguished 63rd anniversary lecturer, Dr. Goke Adegoroye, esteemed panelists, moderators, members of Nigeria's security apparatchik, members of the diplomatic corps, our esteemed traditional rulers who have joined us today, my lords, spiritual and temporal, members of the fourth estate of the realm, the media, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I warmly welcome you to this public lecture and symposium to mark Nigeria's 63rd independence anniversary with a forward-reaching theme, actualizing the vision of renewed hope for socioeconomic development through effective leadership. My name is Eugenia Abu. I'm a multimedia strategy expert, a broadcaster, media consultant, and writer. I'm honored to be your guide on such a great day as this. The epoch-making lecture and symposium is expected to concretize and give to all citizens, friends, and stakeholders alike information and gravitas about how the current government would unfurl its governance structure and ambience. Renewed hope is the mantra of His Excellency, Mr. President, and his government. A resonance of promises made and broken to be taken up and renewed, a time of giving Nigeria a boost. As has always been enunciated by this administration, renewed hope is a clarion call to all Nigerians not to give up the country, a call for sacrifice and rebirth through effective leadership and socioeconomic development. As Mr. President and our very special guest of honor, Mr. Vice President, I want to say, Nigeria is not a poor country. It is effective leadership and excellent management that it requires. As renewed hope travels as a core across the nation, let us not get the feeling that it's just a government mantra. Renewed hope is also for all Nigerians, being our neighbor's keeper, doing the right thing at the right time, giving people their due, following extant rules and regulations, and promoting Nigeria to the rest of the world. They are in the big and small things, like breaking traffic lights. They are in the big and small things, like delivering the reports at the appropriate time. They are in the big and small things, like in fact being effective at your job. It is also a beacon of hope to the downtrodden and the trust to rebuild Nigeria and bring succor. We are gathered here today, Your Excellency, friends, citizens, and stakeholders in this hall, and also at home and also abroad, to have a robust discourse on this subject matter. We have an excellent moderator and brilliant panelists, and we have, of course, our cerebral lecturer, Dr. Goke Adegoroye. Welcome to you all. It's time now to invite to the podium to deliver his welcome address, Your Excellency, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Chairman, Interministerial Committee on Nigeria's 63rd Independence Anniversary, His Excellency, Senator George Akume. Please encourage him as he makes his way to the podium.
Thank you for the encouragement. The Vice President, His Excellency Kashim Shettima, GCON. The Speaker, House of Representatives, Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, members of the National Assembly here present, the Chief of Staff to the President, Head of Service, members of the Federal Executive Council, special advisors, permanent secretaries, members of the Diplomatic Corps, special assistant to the President and Vice President, heads of government parastatals and agencies, traditional rulers, religious leaders, our guest speaker, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to this symposium, being the second of the series of events lined up to commemorate the 63rd independence anniversary of our dear country, Nigeria. Let me begin by conveying my appreciation to His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR, President Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Federal Republic of Nigeria, for graciously approving the events planned for this anniversary and for directing that should be low-key in line with our current economic realities. I similarly wish to recognize and welcome His Excellency, the Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, GCON, for personally attending this program. This underscores the significance attached to the outcome of this symposium by the administration. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the theme for today's symposium, actualizing the vision of renewed hope for socio-economic development through effective leadership, is intended to shed more light on critical areas of Nigeria's socio-economic potentials that could be explored and developed through policies and programs enunciated by this administration. This process is critical because of the dynamic nature of our socio-economic environment and the global systems. It is also significant because President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had, during his recent address at the United Nations General Assembly, beckoned on the world leaders to partner with Nigeria for business and development. I wish to inform you that eminent Nigerians who are knowledgeable and experienced have been carefully selected to speak to these issues. The format for today affords us the opportunity to listen to a lead presentation, after which a robust discussion will be done by the panel of discussants. It is our expectation, therefore, that eminent Nigerians participating in this program would address these economic potentials as well as government policies and programs that could turn them into vehicles for achieving our aspiration of becoming one of the 20 largest economies of the world by 2030. Let me assure you that beyond the celebration of the 63rd independence anniversary, the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation has a coordinating point for implementation of policies and decisions of government that has made full arrangements to to document and carry forward the critical outcomes of the symposium to the highest level of political leadership. Where necessary, relevant national think tank institutions, such as the National Institute for Strategic Studies, NIPS, and the Nigerian Institute for Social and Economic Research, NISOR, would be engaged to deepen the articulation. Similarly, the outcome would be subjected to open discussions by relevant stakeholders, including the civil societies, the labor sector, and academia, to enable us to harness the best and most viable options. Given the foregoing, it is important and imperative that we all pay rapt attention to both the presenter and discussants during the program for better understanding and comments. Your Excellencies, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me at this point commend the members of the Interministerial Committee for putting this program together and for giving it a strong perspective that will transcend the present celebration. Once again, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all, and I wish us a very enriching experience. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you.
His Excellency, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, has pretty much set the tone for today's event. He has talked about the lecture that would be delivered on today's theme to pull out the economic potentials of Nigeria and to also discuss government policies in order to put Nigeria as one of the top economies of the world by 2030. He has also assured us that his office, the Office of the Secretary, for your welcome address, let's see the Vice President of the present. And I see that you came, some wiki has joined us this morning. Thank members of the Federal Executive Council that have come to support. And His Excellency, the Interministerial Committee, which he chairs, also all over the room to ensure that everything is in their numbers that have come to, ladies and gentlemen, to get to the by a gentleman whose short citation I would read. Our lecturer for today's lecture, carefully chosen, deeply honored by the position he occupies as the lecturer for today's event, is Dr. Adegoke Adegoroye, an academic and scientist turned civil servant, and an advocate of integrity in the public service. He is a product of the University of Ife, the University of British Columbia, Vancouver, Canada, where he obtained his PhD in ecophysiology in 1980. A former senior lecturer and member, University Senate and Appointments and Promotions Committee of his alma mater, the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, where he started as graduate assistant, Dr. Goke Adegoroye embarked on his unique and distinguished federal-level public service career at the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, where he pioneered the setting up of Africa's first environmental compliance monitoring and enforcement department, and rose to become the agency's Director General in 1996. He was transferred into the mainstream civil service and regularized as director and served as director of special duties and head think tank to the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. In this position, he was in charge of assignments of responsibilities to ministers and other political office holders. He was also coordinating secretary of the 2003 Presidential Inauguration Ceremonies Committee. He was appointed Pioneer Director General of the Bureau of Public Service Reforms, providing exemplary leadership for the hurricane reforms of the public service carried out by the Obasanjo administration. He was leader of Nigeria's delegation to several intergovernmental meetings on environment and sustainable development, and personal invitation of Prime Minister Tony Blair. He was also on the international conference on the 21st Century Public Services, Putting People First, London in 2006. Elected Vice Chairman of the UNESCO Convention on Underwater Heritage. In retirement, Dr. Goke Adegoroye is the CEO of Governance and Sustainable Development Initiatives, a management consulting firm providing strategic think tank using innovative and practical approaches. He has published extensively with over 200 articles, and he was decorated with the National Honor of Officer of the Order of the Niger. Your Excellency, Special Guest of Honor, Sir, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I'd like to present to you our anniversary lecturer, the very distinguished cerebral Dr. Goke Adegoroye, brother and friend.
Thank you. I'm being put through how to operate what is before me. The Vice President and Guest of Honor on this occasion of the 63rd anniversary of our nation's independence, the head of the Civil Service of the Federation, the Chief of Staff to the President, ministers of the Federal Republic, heads of executive bodies and extra-ministerial departments, members of the diplomatic community, permanent secretaries, service chiefs, directors general and other heads of federal government agencies, parastatals and corporations, heads of paramilitary services, directors of the civil service and other directors service-wide, gentlemen of the press, and members of the First Estate of the realm, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to be invited as the lead speaker at today's event of public lecture cum symposium marking the 63rd anniversary of our nation's independence. I'm grateful to the SGF as chairman and all the members of the Interministerial Committee of the 63rd Independence Anniversary for identifying me to discharge this function. It is my hope that my presentation will do justice to the confidence that they have reposed in me. Actualizing the vision of renewed hope for socio-economic development of Nigeria through effective leadership is a topic that I have been assigned. It is not a light topic or one meant for or born out of banters. Renewed hope is the theme of the manifesto under which our president and his deputy ran their campaign. My understanding, therefore, is that renewed hope is born out of a consciousness of missed opportunities in a country widely recognized for its immense and limitless potentials, and the determination of a man of vision to galvanize the entire populace to believe in the immense possibilities that this nation offers, while offering himself to lead the way. I do not need to get us bored by reeling out the sad tales of our statistics on national development from independence in 1960 to date. It might just suffice to remember where we were in 1960 in relation to China, India, Pakistan, Malaysia, Singapore, the United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, Brazil, etc., and where those countries are today. Or by just comparing us with ourselves to remember where we were in 1980 in terms of our manufacturing industries, oil production, security of lives and property, and individual honor as human beings compared to where we are today. We ran poorly, not just on Human Development Index, but on all global indices of a nation's performance, namely government effectiveness, corruption control index, poverty index, social cohesion, and peace index. Our global ranking on government effectiveness index, which measures perception of the quality of our public services, the civil service, the quality of policy formulation and implementation, and the credibility of government's MDA's commitment to such policies, has been hovering between 162nd and 169th in the last 7 years, compared to our neighbor that ranks second on the GDP in Africa, South Africa, that is at 62. The only measurement where we have been on a steady and unmitigated rise is our population, which has serious implications for our national planning, more so that the median age of our population at 18.6 is one of the lowest in the world, and contrasts sharply with the figures for South Africa at 28, Mauritius at 36.3, United Kingdom at 40.6, Cuba at 42.1, Germany at 47.8, and Japan at 48.6. These sad statistics are certainly what must have been troubling a Bola Ahmed Tinubu as to envision what he will want his dear country to be under the Renewed Hope agenda of his manifesto. The 8-point agenda are food security, poverty eradication, economic growth, job creation, access to capital, inclusion, rule of law, and fighting corruption. Through this 8-point agenda, the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration is, according to one of the key members of his team, Mr. Wale Edun, seeking to, I quote, move away from the frenzied borrowing of the last government to check the unacceptable high jobless rate, achieve economic growth, prosperity for all, and end poverty. And he gave marching order to his ministers to deliver the first phase of the agenda within 3 years. Indeed, as we have all now witnessed, the president could not wait to begin to lay the building blocks for the realization of this avowed vision. As you will recall, right from the grounds of his swearing-in ceremony, he started to plug the leakages in the economy with his pronouncement on the removal of the opaque subsidy to premium motor spirit, PMS. Then there were sector-specific appointments of replacement in CEO positions and/or of special advisors and investigators to unravel what is going on in the Revenue Generation and Economic Crime Agency, the CBN, EFCC, and so on and so forth. His assemblage of ministers has answered many floating questions of inclusiveness, be it on gender, youth, national unity, and/or political stability and technical know-how. His cabinet setup has recognized the enormous potentials of certain sectors for the economy as to propel him to free those sectors of any institutional encumbrances to enable them to unleash the opportunities that abound in those sectors for global competitiveness. In this case, we remember culture and creative industry, the blue economy. His deployment of ministerial portfolios is challenging hitherto biases and stereotypes on religious and/or ethnic appropriation of certain posts and through his actions is restoring a sense of belonging to every Nigerian, irrespective of their religious or ethnic background. His foreign trips so far have been driven mainly by the need to attract investments for our country, and the trips to India and the United Arab Emirates are a classic example. Even his attendance of the United Nations General Assembly still witnessed positive news on investment in the oil sector. These investments are coming in magnitudes that have appeared elusive in the last 10 years. At all times during those trips, he ensures that he meets the Nigerian community in the diaspora to avail them of his programs at home. And the feedback that people like me have been receiving is encouraging. Where mistakes have been made, he has responded promptly with more acceptable options. It is obvious that every aspect of this setup has been deliberately considered and put forward by the President, as none appears to be a fortuitous coincidence. I have been around the top level of the bureaucracy since the commencement of the Fourth Republic in 1999. But this is the first time that I am seeing all these factors play out in just one man. Nigeria is at a new dawn, and I would like to employ one of our main national symbols to illustrate my take. Our coat of arms, the Nigerian coat of arms, is composed of a black shield denoting our fertile soil that is traversed from both the northwest and northeast by two great rivers, Niger and Benue respectively, which meet almost at the center of that vast land to continue their journey southwards to discharge their content in a maze of delta-induced distributaries to the Atlantic Ocean. There are two horses holding aloft that shield, and they represent dignity, while the eagle represents strength. Unfortunately, it appears that the eagle has lost its feathers, not by molting, the natural process of feather shedding that is bound to induce regrowth, but by bacteria and virus-induced losses, symptomatic of our years of mismanagement, corruption, and leadership deficiency at all sectors of our national economy and human endeavors, across all tiers of government at national and subnational levels. And so, the great eagle continues to perch on the toss. But right now, however, a new spirit is awakening the eagle, the spirit of a visionary. In line with Section 147 of the Constitution, which vests in the President the powers to establish municipal representatives are all officers. Together, are to provide the Nigerian eagle to fly, now strain the muscles of effectiveness on one, to work in synergy as to of certain factors that actualizing certain issues, namely between the SGF, the C4, responsiveness, proactive initiative. 5, managing the capacity challenge of the service. 6, pay and labor issues. 7, minister permanent secretary relationship. 8, fighting corruption. And 9, citizen responsibility. The structure of ground. Our first task is to appraise the structure that is currently unfolding from the appointment of the largest number of ministers in our history and the portfolios that have been assigned to them. On this, there are 2 observations that I'd like to make. 1, the number at 48 going 50. 2, the creation and carving out of new ministries. 3, the return of the concept of coordinating minister. The sheer number per se should not pose a problem if the checks and balances cross-cutting measures in extant circulars and the public service rules and financial regulations are enforced. The salary of ministers is not where the headache of government lies, as the remuneration of ministers is just slightly above those of commissioners in executive bodies like the Federal Character Commission. The real problem is with the unrecognized and under-the-table parasites of limitless dimensions that we seek, and the manipulation of projects to satisfy personal interests and the interests of political parties towards. The role of the SGF in bringing these checks and balances, cross-cutting measures, to the attention of all political office holders through service-wide circulars and ensuring their enforcement is crucial. As a first step, he himself will have to set the example in his official dealings. Creation and/or carving out of new ministries is positive for the economy, as it will unlock the potentials hitherto hidden because of fund migration from their vote heads to satisfy requirements in other areas of ministry that are putting pressure. A classic case is the fate of culture and tourism subsectors under the now defunct Federal Ministry of Information and Culture. I served in that ministry, so I know. Even with a permanent secretary that made her career in culture, the information consumed most of their funds. The creation, carving on alignment of ministries in any administration are bound to elicit some form of struggle for mandate capture or retention. The main challenge, however, is how quickly the required alignment of ministerial structure and the consequential movement of personnel is made to take place. In this regard, it is expected that the personnel expertise that exists under the establishment matters, management services, and organizational design units within the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation, as well as the guidance of the Bureau of Public Service Reforms, have been activated. Institutional integrity must not be condoned by the head of the Civil Nigeria, Volume 1, pages 222, stating that government structure on the promise of the long-term vision, further stressing that political rented apartments, as so designated in this, the title that currently carry the coordination as to the aligned ministry that is being assembled, pass infrastructure, and to expand the scope of the coordination under the Minister of Health to cover human development, so that education can come into the fold as it is in Indonesia. In our setting, and bearing in mind the focus of the 8-point agenda, an interministerial approach to bring line ministries to relate with one another, to articulate common grounds for program initiation and execution will be a positive thing, provided that we will ensure geopolitical balance in assigning the coordination. Excuse me, please. Effective coordination and clear-cut responsibilities between the SGF, the Chief of Staff, and the Head of the Civil Service. Actualizing the vision of renewed hope for social economic development of Nigeria through effective leadership is contingent upon effective coordination and clear-cut roles and responsibilities among the leadership of the central bureaucratic offices of government, namely the SGF, the Head of Service, and the Chief of Staff to the President. There is the need to appreciate the constitutional limitations and structural gaps that do not foster effective coordination of the public service by either the SGF or the Head of the Civil Service. The centrality of the Office of the Secretary of Government to the effective coordination and performance of the presidential bureaucracy holds the key to the success of the administration. While the Secretary to the Government of the Federation is not constitutionally empowered to control any service at any given time, it is still supported with at least 6 permanent secretaries, many of whom are charged with responsibilities that have cross-cutting impact, such as economic affairs, political affairs, special services on security, ecological funds office, apart from cabinet office and the general services office. In addition, the establishment of the Office of Policy and Coordination in the office, though at a political office holder level at the moment, provides the crucial platform to track the implementation of the Renewed Hope agenda, as that office can work in collaboration with the economic and political offices, and through them to the entire public service. By the same token, notwithstanding the constitutional interpretation of the civil service of the Federation as service of the Federation in a civil capacity, The scope of the responsibility of the head of the civil service of the Federation is confined to the mainstream civil service, comprising of officers carrying the employment letters issued by the Federal Civil Service Commission, and they constitute less than 6% of the federal workforce. Therein lies the structural gaps-induced challenge of coordination of the federal public service, where a sitting head of the civil service of the Federation is looked up for guidance and resolution of issues across the entire service, and yet is not able to exercise control over those other services. The Chief of Staff to the President is the inner ring of the presidential bureaucracy. The office is designed to manage the time and space of the President. Synergy in the official relationships of the three offices is sine qua non to the actualization of the Renewed Hope agenda. The creation, carving out, and/or realignment of ministries in this administration are bound to elicit some form of struggle for mandate capture or retention. It is imperative that ministers involved, working with their permanent secretaries, are able to resolve this as quickly as possible so that they can settle down to work. No matter how the mandates are spelled out, there will always be some form of overlap. Duplication is what we should strive to avoid, but overlap in functions are an inescapable outcome of an organizational operations. As I once said in my address to the 40th National Council on Health in 1995, ministries, extra-ministerial departments, and agencies are enjoined to close ranks and plug the loopholes in their laws to enable them translate their seeming overlapping functions to strong bonds of strength and effectiveness, as each organ of government is like a building block in the national structure, and no building can stand if the component blocks do not have some overlap. Responsiveness and proactive initiative. How promptly do CEOs of government agencies respond to issues within their mandates brought to their attention? The general complaint is that correspondences are either attended to very late or not responded to at all. Telephone calls are often not returned under the pretense of their being too busy or attending to meetings. We must constantly be reminded of the key requirement that government offices and agencies must be alert to their responsibilities and responsive to the yearnings of the citizens. In the face of the many local challenges that have begun to coalesce and snowball to national problems, this requirement has now become an urgent imperative. Public servants are servants of the public, not their bosses. We need to turn the table of low public confidence in the capacity of our public services across all arms of government at national and subnational levels, as reflected in the quality of policy formulation and implementation, as well as the enforcement of laws and regulations, the degree of their independence from political pressures, and the credibility of the commitment of government itself to such policies. The capacity for proactive initiatives is a defining key attribute of professionalism and leadership. It is an innate quality that sits at the nexus of inspiration and reflex. When it is lacking in people holding executive positions, the safety valve lies in their dual capacity for receptiveness to creative problem-solving ideas by others and the courage to leverage those ideas to take prompt actions. Premium importance needs to be placed on capacity for proactive initiatives, receptivity to ideas, and the courage to take prompt actions in making appointments into top executive positions in government offices and agencies. Job creation, as one of the key pillars of the Renewed Hope agenda, demands a critical review of our current approach to recruitment, the youth challenge, and the crisis of succession in public service. The Council of Retired Federal Permanent Secretaries is advocating, and I quote, a scientific and predictable system of relieving the system of non-performing officers across the strata of the civil service. It's approaching that should be put in place to enhance its slimness and efficiency under an overarching pro-youth recruitment strategy of the Nigerian public service rejuvenation and reinvigoration. Towards this end, the Council is calling on government to, I quote, embark on structural recruitment processes to ensure that the best talents are hired into the public service and to back it up with an attractive and competitive compensation system to retain them in the service. The current trend of clamor for increase of retirement age from 60 to 65 years should be discouraged as it runs counter to pro-youth policy and strategies. Instead, policies that promote renewal and career progression of talents, such as the tenure policy, is what should be implemented in all their ramifications. The median age of Nigeria, as I said earlier, at 18.6, and the retirement age of the public service at 60, give the age band of 41.4 years, compared to less than 30 years for most countries. Still talking about the COFEP's recommendation, I'd like to also expose here that COFEP is also advocating the immediate implementation of Regulation 1 to make the foreign service a separate service. The issues of pay and labor relations, though not directly obvious, constitute underbelly challenges to effective execution of any vision, especially as labor union agitation is currently dominating the airwaves. Despite the multiplicity of heterogeneous salaries and scales, whether it is HAPS, CONJUS, CONTIS, COMMES, TSS, etc., there is still an endless agitation by every professional organization for a separate scale for their sector and members. The issue of dichotomy between treasury-funded and self-funded special salaries structure and the skewed perception of greater importance attached to revenue-generating or revenue collection agencies over their policy department counterparts are potentials for institutionalized corruption. The importance of civil servants in policy desk should never be underestimated in remuneration packages. The undue burden on government in payment settlements arising from cases of questionable procurement leading to default, as you found in the combined expatriate resident permit and alien card contract, and of the Process and Industrial Development Limited, where Nigeria is currently facing a UK arbitration settlement of over $11 billion, and several others like them, should be a lesson to government. The capacity of a nation to grow its economy base is contingent on its ability to move state resources in the direction of capital expenditure for the provision of infrastructure, social services, security, etc. It is this that in turn will affect what can be available for salaries. It is imperative that government develops a national pay policy. On labor issues, I'd like to draw our attention to certain basic facts. 1, labor unions seem to ignore the basic fact that the business of government is to deliver development and services to the populace, and that workers' salary should appropriately be contingent on 1, how well this sacred duty of government is achieved, and 2, ability to pay. Government is not set up merely to pay salaries. 2, their focus on the present without consideration for future workforce is against the principle of sustainable development as enshrined in the constitutional provision of equal access to gainful employment, which also implies intergenerational equity. 3, the percentage of workers under the umbrella of the unionized labor is small compared to other Nigerians struggling to make ends meet in their micro and nano businesses. 4, there is low productivity of many workers in government, the absence of whom do not dent the performance of government agencies, as proven by the COVID-19 protocols. 5, labor issues are often used to exert pressures of political relevance rather than shape the public sector for the better. Hence, the agitations are strategically timed at points of political weakness of a ruling party, usually before the admission setting or just before elections. 6, labor unions place undue focus on remuneration, leaving out human resources issues. For example, their struggle in the last 2 years have been on minimum wage, whereas the majority of public servants across MDAs have been agonizing their stagnation predicament arising from the suspension of the tenure policy and the absence of consequential vacancies for their promotion. Minister-Permanent Secretary relationship, the imperative of mutual respect. Ministers as political heads must strive to accord respect to their accounting officers if they want to succeed. Of course, those accounting officers themselves must also conduct themselves in manners that will earn them that respect. As I stated in my book, page 275, in order to command the respect of their ministers, permanent secretaries should bring the experience of their years of service to bear on their job through proactive initiatives in the quality of their advice, the maturity of handling sensitive and volatile situations, the timeliness of their response to issues, particularly on the directives of their ministers, and their strong commitment to uphold the ethics and values of the system. Reciprocally, ministers in particular will need to exercise great restraint so as not to be perceived as operating under the illusion of absolute knowledge and authority. Neither should they be seen as exploiting the advantage of their unfettered access to the president and the press to undermine and or ridicule their permanent secretaries and other accounting officers. That there are permanent secretaries and directors that are in their 35th year of their service should minister to the youthful ministers in the cabinet about the limits of their know-all postures. To restore the integrity of permanent secretaries' corps, in assigning permanent secretary to ministry, the musical chair mentality of deployment must give way to a fit-for-purpose ministry assignment. And permanent secretaries found wanting after 2 rounds of deployment on account of irreconcilable differences with their ministers and in the absence of sound defense by the head of the civil service should be retired in the public interest. Merit should determine appointments and promotion, not patronage. There should be no room to entertain questions about capacity, professional competence, or corruption of accounting officers in MDAs, as the President is at liberty to determine who is his appointee as a PAMSEC or DG, Executive Secretary, etc. Fighting corruption. Corruption has festered more despite our multiple anti-corruption laws and their enforcement institutions. Across all sectors, whether it is the NNPC, the CBN, FRS, Customs, and the nation's woes have continued to mount. With the integrated payroll and personal information system, the Treasury single account in place, humongous amounts of leakages have continued to occur in the Treasury of government. This speaks of the integrity of many in leadership positions. The searchlight for public sector corruption is always on the career public or civil servants, rather than on the political office holders. This is because, as I stated in my book on page 38, in the kitchen of public sector corruption, the civil servant is the cook that carefully selects all the ingredients and bakes them into an appetizing cake. He is also the waiter that takes the ready product to the laps of the political office holder. and also the cleaner that ensures that any fallout is carefully tidied up so that whoever comes into the system later will not see a sign that anyone has eaten anything therefrom. There are at least 18 channels that I have identified through which recurrent appropriations are abused regularly by accounting officers in collusion with their political heads. Indeed, the art of budget manipulation for personal gains as a mode of operation of yearly appropriations of MDAs has become a coveted expertise that certain political office holders headhunt in the deployment of permanent secretaries and the appointment of DGs as accounting officers in their MDAs. It is incumbent on the accounting officers to checkmate their political heads and themselves from bloated and unrealistic paraphernalia of office in terms of an endless list of perquisites spanning support staff, fleet of vehicles, working tools, energy source, and office space layout. Hiding under the cover of purchase of project vehicles betrayed the public trust. The success of the president in actualizing his renewed hope agenda is contingent on his commitment to really deal with corrupt officials in leadership positions, be they political appointees or career public servants. Doing that at the topmost level is critical, as the integrity backbone of the occupants of those positions is what the accounting officers and their subordinates will rely upon for the courage to do their own job. In conclusion, counting our blessings as a nation, citizen responsibility. 2 years ago, on the occasion of Nigeria's 61st independence anniversary, at the Lux Teraf Leadership Foundation Town Hall meeting on solution-driven and forward-thinking approaches, I issued a statement titled, Nigeria at 61, where do we go from here? Saying that Nigeria has the best balance sheet of natural resources endowment to natural hazard and disaster in the world. And I liken our situation to the proverbial Akebaje, spoiled brat, in Yoruba folklore. I stated that Nigerians are like spoiled brats in the presence of God Almighty. As the Yoruba will say, Akebaje timba omolowoje, meaning undue indulgence is what has rendered the child of the affluent useless. First, you find him crying, and when he's asked what is the matter, he says, it's because I am hungry. So you instruct the steward to serve him a good plate of food. Barely a minute after the plate of food has been placed in front of him, he bursts out crying again. And patiently you ask him what the problem is this time. And he answers, the pile of meat in the plate is not allowing me to reach the soup below. Consider the abundance of our minerals, our biodiversity, with as many as 1,000 species within 1 kilometer in some cases. Ask Minister Dele Alake and the Minister of Environment. And if I may borrow the communication swagger of Minister Yesom Wike of the FCT, where I served, gold, we get them. Gypsum, we get them. Bentonite, we get them. Gemstone, nko, ide nyafu nyafu. But earthquake, we no get them. Tsunami, we no get them. Hurricane, tornadoes, not be our portion. Even the flood that we get, our own Nigeria, na chicken, compared to what other countries face, as we can see. Our malaria gets treatment. It's not like SARS of East Asia countries or Ebola of a neighboring country. Throw maize or yam to the soil in your backyard. You will harvest something in a few months. As citizens of this great country, we need to stop acting like spoiled brats. We must sit up and appreciate the enormous opportunities that God has placed before us by virtue of our natural resource endowment, his protection over us from natural disasters, and the beauty of our triple intertwining diversities across biological, physical terrain, and cultural spheres. These are wholesome blessings that present themselves to us as opportunities as a nation, opportunities that will elude us if we choose not to embrace them, but decide to cling to primordial sectional agenda. We owe it a duty to ourselves, to our children, and the generations yet unborn, to play our parts as leaders at whatever level we find ourselves. The election of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, despite all the odds on his path, must minister to us as a nation about the awesomeness and grace of God. As the president, he has placed before us his vision of renewed hope. At this time in our nation's history, he is the eagle on our nation's coat of arms. The visionary has perched, but his plumage is going to be provided by all of us in leadership positions at all levels, across the 3 tiers of government in this nation, at national and subnational levels. The issues that I've identified in this paper are the feathers to be regenerated by the effective leadership that he is expecting you all to provide in your respective positions. He is anxiously waiting for these feathers to enable him spread those wings to their full span and lift up for Nigeria to soar to the skies of his socio-economic development, national unity, and prosperity. Happy 63rd anniversary of our nation's independence. I thank you all.
Your Excellency, Special Guest of Honor, what an anniversary lecture this has turned out to be. This is the moment for which Dr. Goke Adegoroye was brought to deliver a lecture that would remind us of who we are, that will prepare us for tomorrow, that will renew our hope and keep us centered about all those things Nigerian. It's difficult to see where he did not touch. Efficiency, relationship between ministers and permanent secretaries, problem-solving skills, proactive initiatives, carving out of new ministries, and the efficient deployment of men and women who will carry out the task as objectively as possible. Government agencies and government offices must be alert to their responsibilities, and public servants are servants of the people. He also touched on how deployment should never be at the behest of those who wish to be deployed, that they should be deployed from the office of the head of service according to their skills and abilities and their needs and their expertise. Indeed, what a lecture this has been. The lecture that has been so delivered is at once trenchant, cerebral, well-researched, by a man who is at once an academic, a technocrat, a public servant par excellence, who has really done his work well. Not only did he remind us that we don't have tsunamis, and we don't have typhoons, and all those things that set other nations back. He has talked to us about what God has bestowed upon us as a nation and all the gifts that we have. And for that reason, we thank you, Dr. Goke Adegoroye. A round of applause for our lecturer. Indeed, a great job that will keep us thinking for many months to come about how we carry our nation and how we celebrate her. It's time now, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to go where we are going with the discourse concerning this. But before we get there, I'd like to speak a little bit about our special guest of honor, His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who, as they say each time to all of us, a reader is a leader. His Excellency the Vice President is most comfortable amongst books and constantly is found in and out of bookshops. And when the lecture was going on, could see a man who understands the issues. He nodded, he clapped, he focused, he paid attention. Let's give a round of applause to our special guest of honor for joining us and accepting to be here. A man who loves knowledge. It is fitting, therefore, that he should be our special guest of honor at this Independence Anniversary Lecture and Symposium. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's time now for me to open up the discourse and invite our moderator for this panel. Our moderator for this all-important panel to discuss the theme of this lecture is a moderator like no other, national broadcaster par excellence, interviewer plenipotentiary, colleague, friend, and brother. Please help me welcome the unmissable Mr. Cyril Stober.
Your Excellencies, Mr. Vice President, I'd just like to proceed quickly with the business of the discussion, seeing that all the recognitions have already been made. I'll start off by introducing the discussants and giving you just a brief background on them. I will introduce them in no particular order. So let me invite, for the purpose of being a discussant here today, Mufuliat Fijabi. Mufuliat Fijabi is Executive Director, Sustainable Gender Action Initiative and CEO, Capacity Impact Nigeria Limited. She is a gender and development specialist with more than 2 decades of experience in gender equality and women's empowerment, policy development, and advisory leadership development, resource mobilization, and communications. She was before now CEO of Nigerian Women Trust Fund, Gender Advisor, International Foundation for Electoral Systems, National Gender Expert, UNDP Democratic Governance for Development. She can also be described as a reporter, a journalist, an editor. She holds degrees from the University of Ibadan, University of Lagos, and the University of York. Mufuliat Fijabi is our discussant here. Our next discussant is Dayo Israel. Dayo Israel is the national youth leader of the All Progressives Congress and member of the party's National Working Committee. He's an alumnus of Harvard Business School, Cambridge George Business School, the Executive Development Program of the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, and the London Metropolitan University. He was named one of the 100 most influential people of African descent under 40 in 2017. Dayo has twice been recognized in 2016 and 2017 as one of the UK's brightest young leaders. He was also recognized as one of the top 25 promising Nigerian youths under 35 to serve Nigeria in 2016, and as one of Africa's top 30 most inspirational young people of 2013. That and so many other things. Dayo Israel, another discussant. Let me now introduce our third discussant, Professor Ibrahim Umara. Ibrahim Umara is a professor of international relations and strategic studies, the former head of political science, Department of Political Science in the University of Maiduguri from 2011 to 2016. Currently, he's the Dean Faculty of Social and Management Services, Borno State University, a lead researcher on many scholarly articles in both national and international journals and books. He is author of National Interest and Foreign Policy Options for Nigeria in the Central African Sub-region, and his recent research focuses are on post-conflict rehabilitation and resettlement, de-radicalization and peace-building strategies in the Lake Chad region, internally displaced persons, and challenges of relocation and social cohesion. I give you Professor Ibrahim Umara. And I am Cyril Stober. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the discussants will have just 35 minutes in total to put the issues into true perspective from their angles. We'll try to keep it tight, seeing that the day is progressing and there are other matters that will come up. Actualizing the vision of renewed hope for socio-economic development through effective leadership. That's what they'll be discussing. As a simple introduction to this, hope is easily described as a feeling of expectation and a desire for a particular thing to happen. So when we talk of renewed hope, it means a renewed feeling of expectation. And that in itself presupposes that at some point in time, there was a waning in hope. And so we have renewed hope. Perhaps the discussants will set the tone for this discussion by their opening comments, giving us their perspective of this matter, which was dealt so eminently by Dr. Goke Adegori, which is actualizing the vision of renewed hope for socio-economic development through effective leadership. Mufuli Atfijabi.
Thank you very much. I would like to stand on all the already established protocol. And my starting point, in order not to take much of our time, will be to look at renewed hope as one that is tied with expectations. But I would like to emphasize that there cannot be a renewed hope without a sustained confidence process, which means expectations don't come out of vacuums. There is need for improved confidence in the entity called Nigeria, both on the part of the government and on the part of the people. And the renewed confidence is one that will bring about that successful story around the renewed hope. Nigeria is a country, as has been adequately presented by our lead presenter, that is full of bounties. But over the years, we've been lamenting about where we want to be and what we don't have. But now is the time for us to tie the renewal of hope to that of confidence and trust that can bring about those needs that we so much aspire to have. And I must say that as a country, building it and making it stronger is not just the responsibility of government, but the responsibility of all. However, it is important that since all our trust is tied in the mutual relationship, that we're all accountable to ourselves, both as government and as the people of Nigeria. And in doing this, I would like to, for example, say, I attended University of Ibadan, and I remember very well in those days that they used to tell us that during our own time, we used to eat in these cafeterias, we get our meal tickets, and we used to ask, so what happened? Where are the meal tickets? How come those of us that were there as at 1995 are no longer getting it? And they keep explaining that we're not asking for our right. But unfortunately today also, we have a lot of explanations for our own children, and we remember back in those days that the same questions that we're asking our own lecturers then, our children are asking us now. And one critical point that came out of the lead presenter's paper is the fact that we are growing every day, and we have not successfully managed our population critically in terms of being responsive to infrastructural needs. And I must say that even though no government sets out to fail, there is need for an accountable process that can make things work. Otherwise, for example, I want to give a very quick one. I want to be practical so that we can all be on a page that can lead us to a better future. 8 years ago, when President Muhammadu Buhari was in government, along Sunnyvale Road, you find that some contractors were working there, and immediately it's like 2 months, 3 months to the government's commencement of its own administration, it stopped. I was shocked to find that when the Honorable Minister Nyesom Wike, was about to come into FCT, and the first day he landed, the contractor started working again. So what happened? What happened? This is the question some of us don't have answers to, which means that there's something going on that we don't understand. Why is the road not being constructed? Why is there not an accountable process? Truly, we have resources, but we need to manage it successfully well and be accountable to ourselves. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Well, the Tinubu administration says it will step away from the past and do things in a different manner. And so that's from the perspective I want Dio to look at this topic, actualizing the vision, through effective leadership. Dio has been a leader at various levels as a youth. So we have a huge youth population. How do we incorporate that into the leadership we're looking at here?
Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, Your Excellency, all the excellencies here present, the SGF, the Chief of Staff, the Head of Service, Ministers, Mr. Speaker, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to say a big thank you for the opportunity to represent my generation at this August gathering as we celebrate Nigeria's birthday this weekend. Dr. Agde Goroye gave a fantastic speech about public sector effectiveness and public sector reform. But one of the quotes that I love about leadership is not just that everything rises and falls on leadership, but also the point that when purpose for something is not known, abuse is inevitable. When you don't understand the reason why you're here, or the purpose of the agenda, or what you're here to achieve, it's what you realize at the end is that success is very limited. And why do I say that? First, we talk about renewed hope. There must have been a hope that renewal. So the scripture says, out of Nigerians are sick. Out of economic inequality, out of hope for employment, for funding to the increase of the Japa syndrome. And that's why President Bola the hope of Nigerians to believe in this nation of every public sector at this time and such a time as this. In Yobe State or in Buruku in Benue State, how do we ensure that they find a hope and trust and joy in being in Nigeria? A Nigerian, how they have pride in carrying their passport and that they can go to bed without getting hungry. Because if you don't understand that the role of the public sector and the civil service. It's not just because we want to create jobs. Because many times when government looks at the fact that there's unemployment, we come and say we want to recruit 5,000 teachers. We want to recruit 5,000 laborers. We create agencies to create employment. But that is not the purpose of the public sector. The public sector is meant to be able to provide economic independence and prosperity to the Nigerian people. It is also to be able to ensure that our young people, the future of our nation, grow up in a country that they are proud of and that meets their needs and yearning to become successful and aspirational. And so, as we begin to discuss the role of leadership in renewed hope, we must prioritize and be cognizant of the fact that Bola Tinubu has come now for one reason: to ensure that every disappointment the Nigerian people have experienced becomes a thing of the past, and that we can now build, listen to this please, strong institutions and not strong people. Ajay was talking, for example, about what happened. You had a system in Abuja. A minister came in. The president came in. Everybody was scared that, Buhari was going to come as a military man to change a lot of things. And suddenly, they started going back to side. They started working. After maybe 2 or 3 years, they got relaxed in the system. It was more of the experience of strong individuals, either in ministers or in permanent secretaries or in directors. And then when they heard that wicked they come way, so wicked they come way, you no go green, you go green. Suddenly they go back to sight because they believe in strong wicked. But we must move into not just strong Buhari or strong Wike, to a strong institution, a strong Ministry of FCT, and a strong Federal Republic of Nigeria.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I guess we forgot to add as part of Dayo's resume the singing voice as well. But Prof, the lead speaker talked about capacity, not just knowing what to do, but having the capacity to do those things. And so do you see this topic encapsulating the production of that necessary resource with the capacity to actualize hope? So are we seeing a renewed hope in our education?
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, the Chief of Staff to the President, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I feel highly honored to be with you today to celebrate our 63rd independence anniversary. Capacity is what is expected of when we are marshalling the process of achieving an anticipated outcome. And the realization of hope, as envisaged from the subject matter of discussion, is on ability to marshal human and material resources in order to deliver, to attain. Now, the capacity now lies on two-pronged things. One, within the context of vision that is already attained in relation to delegative responsibility for every individual to act within the confine of whatever term of reference that we are given. And then two, to convey in clear terms a sort of communication to each individual to know and then to act and then to perform in realizing the particular objective that were already envisaged, that the two will conjoin to create two again, within which those that are working on behalf of the leader really know that their leaders are behind based on whatever tools that are necessary for them to act. And then two, their inclusion in the processes of attainment by apportioning responsibilities are the capacities that every nation is aspiring to identify. In relation to education, it's one of the fabrics that we are talking about. And then there are changes, and we have to understand based on the presentations. Sometimes we tend to compare Nigeria with other nations without taking into cognizance the indices of comparison. For those people that have gone beyond, They were within the context of what we call strategic invasion corridor of the rivalry between the then East and West, particularly Indonesia, Malaysia, and Asian tigers. They were so competitive between the United States of America and then the former Soviet. But for us in Africa, we were left on our own, so there are no serious investments that had brewed into the developmental aspect of our nation. So the educational system have to be in line for us to conscientize and then for us to take up. But for the education to take a toll, remember the new rates of payments, particularly the tuition fee, registration fee of the universities, the secondary schools and the primary schools are all things that have to be considered, because without proper primary school, you don't have adequate secondary school, because whatever that the secondary school produces, that is what the universities and the tertiary institutions will observe. If they are not properly trained, then there is where we get the problem. And then again on the presentation of the public sectors, public service sector, particularly of the labor union, Nigeria is a plural country. We are a federal setup. We just don't have to assume what is existing in the East should exist in the South or in the West. It doesn't work this way. We are a federal entity. We have our uniqueness. We have our peculiarities. We are talking about education. What are we talking about? People that have not yet have access to even their local communities. We are talking about galvanization of Nigerians to have a sort of renewed hope. Which hope when people don't even have access to their farmland? We are talking about food security, where people that are engaged in agricultural production are kidnapped, abducted, and carried away. And then the galvanization of the political leadership by renewing the hope for Nigerians is to ensure that the security service sector is beefed up for them to do their job, to secure the environment, as basic prerequisite of every government is to protect the life and properties. In northern Nigeria, in northeastern Nigeria, things are becoming somehow improving now, particularly in Borno and Yobe State, the security situation is improving, but yet in terms of actual, absence of fear of the unknown is still somehow in resonaissance. And for the Southwest, for the North Central and for the Northwest, I think there are certain elements, but the security is doing its best. But for the education, we have to give hope to the young people, the corpus, and then the undergraduates to be in their educational institution without fear of being abducted or kidnapped. Thank you very much.
Well, an interesting point which the lecturer made in his presentation was that the matter of actualizing the vision of renewed hope cannot rest with the government agencies alone. Now, I want us to look at that, the fact that the citizens themselves who are being called upon to renew their hope and commitment to the new workings of a new administration. What is their role, since we're saying this cannot be a government affair all along?
It's now left for the government to have a clear communication channel to carry along the people. Particularly what is happening on ground has to be improved. Governance is a structural functional phenomenon within which those that are governing are using some sorts of institutional apparatus. The institutions are responding to the responses of the populace that they ought to serve. And if the people are carried along through adequate mobilization, advocacy, through practical issues that will make them to have a sense of belonging, I think the people will have a hope. Particularly His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, when he was the governor of Borno State, he had a sort of challenges that really make some people to even lose hope, particularly in terms of destructions and devastations to life and properties. Almost 75% of the local governments in Borno State were displaced, but the governor refused to leave in order to give a great hope to the people of the state. That is one, when he was a governor. Two, without relenting on the airports, any destruction on any infrastructural facility, he is on spot to ensure that it has been rebuilt. And then three, those that were already displaced, he ensured that he camped them at the internally displaced camp, redeploy the civil service at the state and the local government sectors, each at designated IDPs, for them to continue servicing either the health or educational needs of the people. This created the hope. Even those that left Borno as an IDPs outside Borno State, on hearing what is going on because of the renewed hope, they went back to the state. If we are going to apply this type of method, being resilient, of delegating responsibilities, of solving problems, if the people are aware of their problems are being taken up by the leadership, they will naturally going to be mobilized in supporting the particular visions and aspirations of the federal government.
All right.
Thank you.
Dayo, let's come to you. And this energy that the mass of youths possess, how do you harness that when you talk about renewed hope and actualizing the vision through effective leadership, even at their levels?
Thank you. First, let me use the opportunity to highlight something. We're sitting on a time bomb, and the clock is ticking. 2 years ago, we had a massive protest by young people for the NSAS. The turnout was amazing, back to back for days. Recently, after the death of the young man Mohbad, there was a candle walk across the country. Young people turned out en masse. The reason why those critical numbers of young people come out a lot when there are those kind of protests and activities is because, like they say, an idle hand is the devil's workshop. A lot of our young people are at home without employment, without financing, without a form of support. And so our approach must be people first. Let me borrow the words of the president. The president said, Tobani, I'll say it in Yoruba, Tobani ta lo kan, Yoruba lo kan. Tobani Yoruba wo lo kan, Emi lo kan. In other words, when they say whose turn it is the turn of the Yorubas. When they say which Yoruba, it is my turn. Now, when they say whose turn it is, in the renewed hope agenda, it's the people. We must have a people-first approach. And then when we say which people is first, it's not the Hausa Fulani people, it's not the Igbo people or the Shekiris or the Yoruba, it's the young people, the youth of our nation, over 75% of our population. The energy is there, the passion is there, the capacity is there, the willingness is there. What is lacking is the engagement for them to be able to achieve economic prosperity. In the past, there have been many governmental interventions to ensure that we can support and invest in young people. But if we look at the matrix of monitoring and evaluation and look at the impact of that, lack of access to those opportunities is also very enormous. And so for us as Renewed Hope advocates, one of the things that this administration must, and I have no doubt that under the leadership of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu and all our fantastic ministers who are in this hall, and our governors across the country, will prioritize is in ensuring that truly government will serve the needs of its people and provide access for young people to access investment. I'll give you an example. We have Bank of Industry funding. We have NISA funding. We have the 75 billion Nigerian Youth Investment Fund. But let's be real with ourselves and look at the percentage of young people who have been able to access this funding in the past. And so we must prioritize and ensure that more we unlock these opportunities for young people, in particular at the grassroots level, so that this prosperity can spread across the nation. You will have less restiveness, less conflict. I've spoken to a lot of our leadership of our government, but this is our prioritizing engagement of young people.
Let's look at feedback, and this now says it's pulling in a deliberate away from the usual.
Gender, of course, is of top as made at the international 6. It means that we have, I'm seeing a shift, but the shift is not enough. It's not enough in the sense that as a country, we had a benchmark that we set for ourselves in the national gender policy, which is even far more about the global benchmark, And Last year, 2022, we also had a court injunction speaking to the need for the government to respect its own gender policy, by ensuring that at least at the minimum, there is 35% inclusion of women and men in all political appointive positions, not just at the federal government level, but starting from the local government level. So the shift is seen and the political commitment is seen, but we would need to see it translate more into action in terms of the number of political appointees and the extent to which there's a gender balance. And of course, we know also as a nation, having committed to the UN Resolution 1325, that women are critical in peace-building processes. And this tells us a lot, with the need to completely move away from some of the challenges we have with security in our country. So gender is critical, gender is very important, but at this point, we need some deliberate efforts, such as an affirmative action, to ensure that this happens. And of course, in a nation-building process, we cannot underestimate the contribution of women and the role they play, in governance. And I would like to say that it's very important to put in place sustainable actions that can enable the process, that can make it more convenient for women, to enjoy, and men alike, to enjoy the good dividend of democracy. And I want to give an example. Primary health care is very important, it's critical, but the state at which our primary health care centers are today are not the best. And we know that women, one of their first places of call, especially in the communities, will be to go to primary health care centers to take care of their health. So I'm also using this platform, to say that to further affirm that shift, we need to take care of some of the basic things, that affect and impact on the lives of women. And also looking at infrastructure, this is critical. If I take road, for example, it has a lot of economic impact on how we have access to farm produce from the deeper communities, where women and men alike need to bring out some of those farm produce that they have invested a lot in, over the years, especially when it's the time of harvest. And like has been said, Nigeria is a very rich country in terms of agricultural produce. We need to invest, to make it more accessible and to make it very interesting to people. I was with a group of other West African colleagues, some 3 weeks back on a pre-election visit to Liberia. And we were doing analysis. And because Nigeria now has, a very strong hold on its production of rice, it was very obvious that to buy a bag of rice in Nigeria was reasonable in price than you could find in Ghana, for example. I know we were discussing about governance and government, and some of my colleagues from this West African sub-region said that please just tell your country, your President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, to just make our country part of Nigeria, because it seems you people are enjoying more than us. I said, yes, we're not there yet, but we're trying our best. These are colleagues who are professionals. And from that visit also, my joy was also increased by the fact that some of the state actors, non-state actors that we also met at different fora, were listing some of those kind of support that they were expecting from Nigeria as a country, to a fellow country in the West African sub-region. This means that Nigeria is not a failed state. We're not where we want to be, but there is need to put in more deliberate actions to achieve what we need to achieve. And in doing this, women cannot be left behind. Women need to be fully included in actualizing the renewed hope of the current government. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much. And with just about 10 minutes to go, I'd like us to return to the main plank of the lecture. And the lecturer talked about coordination. And he's talked about relations amongst key agencies of government, the bureaucracy, for instance. As we round off, let me start with you. how quickly should the coordination be amongst the agencies of government? How quickly should that be if we are to keep this drive for renewed hope alive? Yes.
Thank you. The time is now. We don't have much time because, of course, government is transitional, but the country, the people remain. So the coordination should start now. And I'm also using this platform to say that one key critical area is to have the people on the page of the government, and that's through a real reorientation. The National Orientation Agency should be at work to ensure that there is adequate coordination in the kind of thinking and rethinking process of Nigerians as a people. You know, we need to have that value in us, that to be a first-class Nigerian citizen is not comparable to a second-class citizen where people jackpot or where people go to today. I would rather be a first-class citizen of Nigeria rather than be a secondary citizen. So the time is now.
All right, thank you. Well, Dayo, I'd like you to look at that as well, but have at the back of your mind how you can discourage the concept of juicy postings. The lecturer alluded to that.
Thank you. Let me use the opportunity first to thank the President and the Vice President for an increased level of youth inclusion in this administration. We've never had it this good. There have been so much young people, phenomenal young people even from the grassroots who've been carried along, let me use that word, in the administration. Mr. Vice President, sir, thank you for Ningi, thank you for Amshi, thank you for all of the young people on your team. And of course, Mr. President, thank you for Atika, thank you for Moremi, thank you for all the fantastic young people. Chief of Staff, we're very grateful for upping youth inclusion in this administration. We've never seen it this way before in Nigeria. And of course, we want more, we expect more. There's still thousands of young people out there who work for the party and who have competence and capacity and who are waiting for a platform to serve their fatherland and their motherland, whichever one it is for them. I think I see Shegun Dada there. With, you know, Aziz, there's a lot of young people there. Now, about when do we start? We need to start as far back as yesterday. This is the time to hit the ground running. And see, Uncle Cyril, you were talking about the issue of GC ministry. It goes back to my first point. When the purpose for something is not known, abuse is inevitable. If you don't understand that you're not here because you've come to get a good life or a reward, but it's about people first. You understand that Nigerians are waiting, Nigerians are anxious, we are promised a lot during the election, and they want to see performance. And so every day they're waiting to see something good from all our ministries and all our agencies. But also the reality is that the ministers, their success depends on the effectiveness of the public servant and the civil servant under our beautiful head of service, Mrs. Esson. And so all of us, it's not just about the cabinet ministers themselves, but even the career civil servant need to wake up that it's not business as usual, and we have a bomb ticking. We have a responsibility to show people that we know where we are taking them to. They say, follow who know road. If we can't show people that we, on time, that we know where we're taking them to, and they're anxious and saying, what's going on, they will lose confidence, like you said. But when they see that you are showing capacity, you're showing direction, it is easy for them to calm down, knowing that the man of the wheel. What we have so far today is the goodwill of the president. They know that they can trust him. We know that we believe in him. We know that he knows what to do. We must ensure that we are proactive so that we don't exhaust or waste the goodwill that Nigerians have in the president.
Thank you, Prof. And on to you, Prof, in rounding off, I'd like you to quickly look at how you can, in promoting effective development through effective leadership. I'd like you to look at the role from the office of Democrats and those in office.
The Chief Secretary to the Government of the Federation is the Chief of Staff to the President and Commander-in-Chief. But nerve center of service in to ensure who serve as a custodian of that will be written by some of the technocrats of the correspondences between the head of state and some ministries. And it's only the the chief of staff to the president that may be aware, because the letters must go through his ministry, through his office before it reach the head of state. So the president should exercise and demonstrate leadership ability to ensure that the delegative responsibilities are effectively respected, that each for its responsibility and each for its jurisdiction and authority. Without that, if the president just leave it as it is, without delineating the functions and the roles of these three principal officers, the permanent secretaries then will now run to any of the offices, depending on the one that is on the book, what you call green book, or the most favored, based on their perception. So all in all, what I am saying is, whether it is the secretary to the government of the federation, the chief of staff to the president, or the head of civil service, it depends on their relationship with the president based on the perception of the principal officers that make them to act. But the president, based on the missions and the visions that I have seen, I think he is capable of carrying along through each of the ministries, performing relative to the areas of their jurisdiction and function. And may I seize that opportunity to say that we are only hammering on the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We have to take into cognizance the subunit that make up the Federal Republic of Nigeria. A success of the Ministry of Agriculture depends on the ability of Yobe, Adamawa, Taraba, Borno, Sokoto, Zamfara Ministry of Agriculture to align with. And then the successes of the state ministries also depend on the successes of the departments of agriculture in the respective local governments. So when you are talking about coordination vertically, you just don't have to neglect the horizontal coordination between the tiers and the arms of the government. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And it is on that note we round off this segment of the symposium. I'd like you to once again appreciate the discussants. Mufuliat Fijabi, thank you. Dio Israel, thank you, always a delight. And Professor Ibrahim Umara, thank you very much. Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, that concludes this segment of today's program. And at this point, let me call on my colleague, Eugenia. Right, there you are. Right, it swings back to you now. Thank you.
Your Excellency, sir, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our excellent panelists. A round of applause for them again. Of course, they were moderated by one of Nigeria's finest broadcasters, Mr. Cyril Stover. High points at this time: renewed hope for a secure nation, renewed hope for a government that carries the youth along, renewed hope for good governance, renewed hope for adequate coordination and deployment, renewed hope for gender equity, renewed hope for effective leadership and effective relationship between the office of the SGF, Chief of Staff, and Head of Service. Renewed hope for watching our population to tie with our infrastructural development, and renewed hope for the federal government to align with states through policies, developments, and projects. Renewed hope for primary health care. It is important, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to tie this panel discussion and circle it back to Dr. Goke Adegoroye's paper. When Mr. Dio Israel was thanking Mr. President and Mr. Vice President for the likes of Special Advisor Princess Atika and her colleagues in the youth generation, for whom we are all very proud of them, I recalled a segment of the paper of Dr. Adegoroye where he says, it is the role of the permanent secretaries to show the way in the limits of the young persons in government, the limits of their know-all posture. That doesn't remove from the fact that young people are exceptionally brilliant, highly digital, and have a focus of where they are going. When you meet them, you know that there's a lot to learn. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, many years ago, about 7, when I retired from active public service, I went to the United Nations Institute of Aging to go and learn how we age. And I found that it was important to have intergenerational aging. Older people with their wisdom, younger people with their technology and their forward-driven ideas. And I was sent to that establishment by a woman who has spent all her time working on the aging population. A woman who sat in the NGO space and built capacity for so long. I was sent there by a lady called Dr. M.M. Omakwaru, whom the federal government deemed fit to make Director General, National Senior Citizens Center. And when she sent me there, she said, there's a lot to learn in the aging space, and indeed I learned a lot. It's critical that young people understand that they need old people, elder citizens, and elder citizens understand that they need young people. I dare say that His Excellency President Tinubu, His Excellency our special guest of honor, understand these dynamics and this interrelationship. We thank you, sir. We thank Mr. President for taking this on board. Round of applause for them. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, at this time I would like to invite for an intervention His Excellency, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas.
The SGF, the Chief of Staff, Honorable Ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me to stand on the already established protocol. I am not slated to speak. It is, I think, an impromptu decision that I need to say 1 or 2 words on behalf of the National Assembly. So please forgive me for not going to be very elaborate, because it's not something that I have prepared in advance. Nonetheless, I would want to, on behalf of the Senate President, distinguished senators and honorable members of the House of Representatives, to welcome each and every one of you to these very historic occasions. I stand with profound gratitude to the Almighty God for giving us the opportunity to witness another historic pre-independence anniversary lecture. It is indeed very gratifying that this year's choice of a theme is apt. It is cogent, it is important considering the socioeconomic crisis and issues that we have been bedeviled in this country. And I'm particularly happy on the choice of the speaker, the lecturer on this particular lecture and symposium, which I believe has been very bold. He has been very bold, very frank, and very courageous. Most of the things he mentioned are things that the Nigerian project needs to really reflect on, needs to really think about, because they are those things that if only we sit down and do, this country would move to a greater height. The panel of this that the Nigerian project emphasized concerning all nations have not taken serious. The up with a living wage. He is paid enough country children to school. Today in the Nigerian project, this is what is completely absent. The level of our wage, I don't see how any Nigerian can be able to, on this administration, to please look into this issue. Let us, for the very first time, sit down and look at means and ways of coming up with an effective living wage system. A wage that each and every Nigerian, irrespective of your position, you have enough to eat, you have enough to pay rent, you have enough to pay for your transportation to office. Unless we solve that problem, the issue of corruption will continue to be just a myriad. Fight against corruption will not succeed. So thank you, honorable colleagues, for this opportunity given to us. And I want to assure you all that the 10th National Assembly has never gotten the right opportunity to operate well. Because this is the only time in the short history of Nigeria that you find the president of the country as an ex-National Assembly member, the vice president as a former National Assembly member, the SGF as the former National Assembly member, the chief of staff as former National Assembly member. Majority of ministers sitting here all happen to be product of the National Assembly at one time or the other. So we are lucky in the National Assembly that we have our own people whom we are thinking in the same lane that are also on the other side. So we have no excuse. We have no excuse to the Nigerian people that we cannot be able to succeed, particularly at this very trying time. We have people from the other side that are willing to come to us. And we are people as well who are willing to also go to that side for us to harmonize, to partner, to collaborate in ensuring that the Nigerian people get the best out of us. I would want to seize this opportunity on behalf of the National Assembly to congratulate the President, the Vice President, the entire executive branch, and indeed the Nigerian people for this golden opportunity we have to celebrate the 63rd anniversary. It is an opportunity for us to reflect on where we have gotten it wrong in the past and be able to come up with solutions that will ensure that the future is going to be a much, much brighter one. I thank you all for listening, and I wish you all the best. May God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, the special guest of honor, representatives, has spoken, classmates and our schoolmates, a gradient to the Secretary to the Government of the Federal, was doing what we thank Right Honorable Symposium. We thank you, sir. Thank you. The Secretary to the Government citizen in the room here today to invite our special guest of honor.
This is our special guest of honor to come forward and make his speech. Your Excellency, sir.
You can kindly sit down, please. You can. Born in Zaria in 1962, she calls herself a media personality, a multi-talented broadcaster, a consultant, a poet, and a writer. But she is much more than that. She is an activist, she is a feminist, and for well over 2 decades in primetime television. She was Nigeria's answer to Oprah Winfrey, Christiana Amanpour, Katie Couric, and of course, Barbara Walters' role into one. Thank you so much, Eugenia Abu. Your Excellency, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator Dr. George Akume, the Chief of Staff to the President, Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation, Dr. Folashede Yemi Esan, members of the Federal Executive Council present, special advisors and other senior aides to the President, permanent secretaries, directors general, and heads of extra-ministerial agencies and parastatals, members of the diplomatic corps, our royal fathers, elder statesmen and captains of industry, distinguished presenter of the anniversary lecture, Dr. Adegoke Adegoroye, members of the organizing committee of Nigeria's 63rd Independence Anniversary Public Lecture, honored guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Today we gather to honor Nigeria's journey to redefine its destiny. Today we stand on the precipice of history to reflect upon a nation that has defied the predictions of doomsayers, a nation that has become the metaphor of resilience. Over the past 63 years, we have not only survived, but thrived because of our collective resolve, our commitment to progress, and the enduring spirit of unity that binds us together, from Aba down through to Ogbomoso, to Zaria, to Burning Kebbi, despite the conspiracies of minor vested interests. While this anniversary offers us another opportunity to acknowledge the cross-regional bonds that kept us standing as Africa's most populous nation and largest economy, we are here to remind ourselves that the future we promise Nigerians isn't an empty performance for electoral purposes. You can't renew the hope of the nation unless you are prepared to pursue bold reforms. And President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has undertaken to build a country where the economic independence of each citizen is guaranteed, where none of us has to depend on unspecified handouts to earn a living. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our history, like that of every nation, isn't just a record of surviving attacks on our sovereign integrity and social welfare. Our history underscores the commonality of our shared humanity. The most recent memory, the COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, brought this starkly to the fore. The tragedy reminded us that viruses do not discriminate based on ethnicity or religion, and that our strength as a nation is driven by our collective faith in the ideal that define us and the moral character of our leaders. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I love Nigeria. I believe in the Nigeria project. Not because of my vested interests. I am 57 years old. As per the UNDP, the average age of a Borno man is 47. So I'm well past my prime. Certainly not because of my family. I have only a wife and 3 kids. I believe in Nigeria because if Nigeria works, the black man works. The last election was probably one of the most divisive elections in the contemporary annals of Nigerian history. ethno-religious, and regional fault lines were deliberately manipulated for political ends. But it is pertinent to mention, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, that the most northern of northern states is Sokoto. The Nigerian candidate lost by a few thousand votes to the regional candidate in Sokoto. It's Benue, in Benue State. Team. The most the Nigerian candidate, Nyesom, is populated by careful snails who do carry Adela Kunz. The Kingsley, the Abdul Qadir Balarabe Musas, the Bala Usman, we saw Nyesom Wike. And rests on the intention, sincerity, and innovative ideas of its leaders and their commitment to implementing them. This is why President Bola Tinubu's 8-point agenda remains an oasis in a scorching sun. We cannot renew the hope of the nation unless we deliver on our promise to drive food security and eradicate poverty. We cannot foster economic growth and nurture job creation unless we facilitate access to capital, enhance national security, and optimize the business environment for our enterprises. We are going to uphold the rule of law and fight corruption to design the Nigeria of our dream. We can't achieve any of these unless each citizen remains a strategic partner in pursuit of our ultimate national interests. At 63, we recognize that what has sustained us and propelled us forward is our collective belief that overcoming the challenges we have inherited necessitates sacrifices, especially from us, the leaders. We are driven by the realization that these sacrifices are not for naught. They are investments in a brighter future, investments that will redeem the fortune of our great generation and guarantee the well-being of generations to come. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the present administration also recognizes that the sacrifices made by each Nigerian will never be in vain. Such solidarity with our economic revival strategy, from the bustling streets of Lagos to the serene landscape of Enugu, has inspired our focus on diverse sectors, from agriculture to digital technology, from healthcare to education. We knew from the starting point of this race to serve the people that the track will not be without its holes and thorns. We knew that challenges will arise and obstacles will test our resolve. But as our history has shown, Nigerians are too ambitious to be broken by a temporary setback. We are going to emerge from this phase of our reform stronger, each of us with renewed hope, as we honor the labor of our heroes past, as we reflect on the values and principles that have brought us this far, as we strive to excel in all that we do, and as we work together towards a future where opportunity knows no bounds. Let's remember that our most potent weapon is the overriding resolve of the majority to choose unity over chaos and democracy over anarchy. Thank you, and happy independence.
Your Excellency, the special guest of honor, what a powerful speech that was, truly powerful, about the fact that our potent weapon as a nation is to choose unity over and above anarchy. In addition to that, the government in this administration plans to enhance national security, uphold the business environment, uphold the rule of law, and to remind ourselves as we gather here that the future promised Nigerians by His Excellency the President and the Vice President is not an empty talk. And the future of any nation rests in its plan to innovate and create. His Excellency the Vice President reminded us severally how much he loves Nigeria and how we should put together our shared humanity to move the nation forward. Let's give another round of applause to our special guest of honor, who has spoken so well and who has delivered such a powerful speech that we would remember. I'd like to add a caveat. Your Excellency, I'd like to thank you, sir, for your kindness, for choosing to celebrate a humble person like me just before your speech. It is truly humbling, and I truly appreciate it. I'd like to announce, before we take the vote of thanks very quickly, that after the national anthem, everyone will remain seated except the special guests who would be led by the protocol, along with the speaker and discussants, who will go into the special room for their refreshment. Every other person would please remain seated. Your Excellency, sir, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, would like to thank you for staying the tide with us throughout this afternoon. And you were a bit distracted when I thanked you, sir, for just making such an incredible honor at this time to my humble self. I thank you, sir. At this time, I'd like to invite a woman very much after my heart. May I please ask you to be quiet at the back? Our special guest of honor is still in the room. Can the ushers keep it quiet at the back, please? Thank you very much. Your Excellency, I'd like to invite a woman very much after my heart, sir. One whose father was iconic and whose name you mentioned in your speech. In her own right, a very cerebral woman. Her father, iconic, even when we were in ABU Zaria, his name went ahead of him, Professor Bala Usman. Today, I invite the Special Advisor to the President on Policy Coordination, my sister and friend, Hadiza Bala Usman, to come forward and deliver the vote of thanks. Well done.
The Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, GCON, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Dr. Tajuddin Abbas, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, our very own Senator George Akume, the Head of Service of the Federation, my dear sister, Dr. Folashade Yemi Assam, the Chief of Staff to the President, Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, the Honorable Ministers here present, the Permanent Secretaries, our distinguished members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen. My job here is primarily to thank you all for being here, to appreciate the mandate that has been given to the Interministerial Committee for the 63rd Independence Anniversary celebration. This committee was ably chaired by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, His Excellency Senator George Akume, to coordinate this series of events that are started on Monday and will culminate on Sunday. I would also like to express our gratitude to His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, for giving us the opportunity to serve Nigeria on the platform of the Interministerial Committee. Similarly, our appreciation goes to the Vice President, His Excellency Senator Kashim, GCON, for gracing this occasion in person and presenting a very exciting submission. This event will remain an interesting part of our 63rd independence celebration. Would also like to appreciate our keynote lecturer, Dr. Goke Adegore, for coming and giving us a very enlightening presentation. The details, which was also further expatiated by our panelists. The panelists that have come from across Nigeria to deliberate on his lecture, I would also like to extend the appreciation of the Interministerial Committee. On that note, I would like to once again thank the President for granting us this privilege to serve on this committee, and also to thank everyone for gracing us with their presence at this event. Thank you very much. God bless us all, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Your Excellency, sir, the special guest of honor, now that the vote of thanks has been done, I'd like to crave your indulgence, sir, to invite those who would be in the group photograph. I'd like to invite all those who are seated on the black chairs, except His Excellency at this point. Everybody sitting on the black chair should please come forward. Your Excellency, the SGF, Head of Service, Minister of Information, everybody on the black chair should come forward. All special advisors should come forward. All honorable ministers should come forward, please. Special advisors, honorable ministers should please come forward. And that is the group photograph. I'd like to urge all of us to remember to remain seated. His Excellency and the special guests will depart. Our special guests will go into a special room along with discussants. And the speaker, can we have Dr. Adegoroye in this picture, please? Thank you very much. My apologies. Dr. Adegoroye, where are the panelists? Real quick. The panelists, Your Excellency, I crave your indulgence. The panelists, please. Mr. Cyril Stober. Make your way quickly. This was a symposium. Mr. Stober in the picture, please. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, this is the official photograph that determines that we had a symposium and lecture, where, as my people would say, we called ourselves aside and advised ourselves. A phenomenal symposium lecture for this event. Congratulations to all the panelists and the speaker. National anthem. National anthem. Excellency, once again, we thank you for coming. We thank all participants for being part of this. Please remain seated while His Excellency takes his leave. The special guests will make their way to the special room for refreshment. The rest of us would remain in the room. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to serve.